Okay, so we're back again. So in this video, we're going to make something a little bit more interesting, but we're still in that general territory of wanting to just go from start to finish without a whole lot of editing. We're just going to make another simple animation without doing any complex 3D modeling or any of the more tricky stuff that we'll get to in the coming weeks. I just want you to show you now how to make stuff and how to get things in and out of Blender quite quickly. Now I want to say something about how you complete these exercises, because I know early on with software it's very common for you to want to just copy exactly what I do, especially when you're learning. Often it's the easiest way to just make sure that things work. But when it comes to submitting your exercises, I don't want your exercises to look exactly like my work. They should never look exactly like what we do in the video. The video is here to show you how to use functions, but when you make experiments yourself, I want you to surprise me. Make something that looks different. Use different colors to me, different shapes. And now we're going to download some objects from online, so you don't have to download what I download. You can really, make any object, make any sort of animation, make yours look as different from mine as possible. Let's have that as a goal. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a 3D model from the internet, and we're going to make maybe a slightly more fun animation. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to get this view back to the shaded mode. It's just a little bit easier to look at. Now there's a quicker way to do it. If I press the letter Z, you'll see it just brings up a little floating menu of the different modes. So, very quickly I press Z, move my mouse to here and click, and back we are. You don't even have to click. I can just go Z, move my mouse down, whoop, like this. It's a nice quick way to work. Okay, so we're in the solid mode. I'm going to delete this cube. It's been nice knowing you, cube, but your time is done. To delete something, left click, you can press X and then just click on delete, or you can right click, deletes there, or you can go into the scene collection and also right click and delete. So X and delete is the fastest. Okay, so I'll just go back into the modeling area so we can just see our workspace. Now there's nothing here. Let's go online and find something fun. Okay, so we're going to use the website Turbosquid. Turbosquid is just an online repository of 3D models. You have to make yourself an account. It's free. Well, there's lots of free stuff, and you can buy stuff as well. And you can sell stuff. If you make good models, put them on Turbosquid, sell them, go for it. Okay, so make an account, make a login, and then maybe pause the video, do that, then come back to this point. Once you have an account, let's just search for something. I'm going to search for a building. Building. Don't save my password. Okay, wow, lots of stuff. Now, the question is, which things do we use? I'll just mute my email notifications there. Okay, all right. So now I assume that you don't know much about 3D models, and there's so many different types of file formats. So let's just make our search a bit more specific to things that we want. Price, let's set that to free, and it'll refresh the search. Formats. Now, lots of different files here. Blend here, that's the Blender project file. So we could download an entire Blender project, but actually we just want the objects. So I'm going to go .obj file, and we could also use .fbx. So I can tick .fbx as well. OBJ and FBX are very common exchangeable file types for 3D. So both of those will be very usable for us. So we've got our search filters set to free models, OBJ and FBX files. Obviously not all of them are free. Okay, what to download? I can see some that I've used before. I do like this one. It's got some fun things to do with it. Okay, I'll use my favorite building again. So if I click on this building here, I think I have to add it to my cart. See if that worked. Yep, okay, it's taken me to my cart. Now, okay, obviously I use Turbosquid quite a lot, so where has my building gone? Gosh, there's too much stuff here. Where did it go? Is it right at the end? Yes, it is. Okay, so here's the apartment building number 26. Okay, so I'll just download, let's see what types of file it has. It actually has different versions of this in many different types. So I want to download the OBJ. Apartment building number 26, obj.zip. Okay. And now I'll just save the file. So let's get that file somewhere practical. I'll go into my downloads. There it is, apartment building. I'll just unzip it, extract the files, and I will extract them to, let's put them where all the Blender stuff is, huh? Here's the Blender folder. Oh no, the VART folder. That's what we made, isn't it? VART 3435. Let's make a new folder and call it 3D models. And we'll put it right there. Okay, we'll do that extract. Now, I'll check that location. That should be there already. VART, 3D models. Okay, great. And there's the OBJ file and this MTL file. The MTL, if you remember from earlier, when we made the cube pink, I'll just bring a cube back in here quickly. We changed its material. That's what made it pink. And .mtl is a material file. How did I add that cube so quickly, you might ask? I should show you. There's a shortcut. We can go the long way. We can look in the menus up here and say add mesh cube, or I can simply go Shift A and I get the same menu and I just put in a cube. And we didn't see anything there, but that's just because I have two cubes. How did I move the cube like that? It's another good question. I pressed the letter G for grab, and then I pressed the letter Y. And the letter Y makes sure that I'm moving it on the Y axis. So if you look at this, this is called the gimbal up the top. It shows us Z, Y, and X, and they're color-coded. So X is red, Y is green, and Z, which we can't see here, is blue. And we can click on them too. If I click on X, it shows us a two-dimensional view looking straight down that red line. Click on Y, same thing, Z, same thing. Now, of course, we're looking at a cube, which means that every view will be the same. But if I add in a different type of object, Shift A, let's add in the monkey. It's also added at 0, 0, so my other cube's in the way. G and X. Okay, so now we've got a monkey. Now, if I look at the monkey down the Y-axis, we can see the back of the monkey, the X-axis, the side of the monkey, and the Z-axis, the top of the monkey. Okay, so that's just a little bit more of the viewport explained. But okay, we want that building, and we put that building in our Blender folder, the 3D models folder, and the apartment building is there. But how do we get it into Blender? Let's just delete all these things. I'll Shift select, press X and delete them. So I want that apartment building to come in. So File, Import, what do we download? An OBJ. Let's import the OBJ, and now we have to look for it. So I put it on my hard drive, in my Blender folder, my VART Blender folder, my 3D models folder, and there it is. There's that OBJ. And let's hit Import OBJ. Woof. Okay. I think that OBJ is quite big. I'm going to zoom out, and okay, the building is huge. It's so huge that if I zoom out, I can't really see it anymore. And when you can't see something like this, this is what's called camera clipping. So Blender, because this space we're working in is almost infinite, Blender often restricts how much of it we can see, just so that our computers don't slow down too much. Of course, we can change this over time. But what I'm going to do is actually just make the building smaller, so I don't have to change anything else. So there's a number of ways to make it smaller. If I press N, and we can look at the scale, I can, move these scale toggles down, or I could type a number into them. What if I type 0.5 into all of them? Press enter. Okay, the building is a bit smaller. I can also just press S and also type in, I'll type 0.5 again. And it's gotten smaller by half. So now you can see that the scale here is 0.25, which is, a half times a half. Okay, I can also just press S and move my mouse. That works too. Now, when you press S and move the mouse, see that little dotted line that happens between the object and my mouse? If I press right click, it will undo the operation. But that dotted line, often the longer it is, the more control you have. So when I want to use that manual scale, I move my mouse further away from the object, click S, and I drag it in. Okay, but how small is too small? Well, let's go back to the animation tab and look at what the camera sees. Looks like this building's still too big because I think we're just looking in a window. So scale, 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 scale. Okay, there we go. Here's our building. That's getting a little bit better. Maybe I'll move the building down in space a little bit. G, Z, so it's just moving on the Z axis, and I can move it down. Or I can move the camera up. G, Z, move the camera up. Maybe I'll do that so that the building is still kind of on this ground plane here. Okay, let's make the building a little bit smaller again. Scale. Okay, I wonder what that looks like if I render it. Now I can go render, render image. If you have like a keyboard that has, all of the function keys at the top, you can also just press F12 to render the image. Okay, cool. So there's my building. All right, and when we download the building, it's got some default materials on it that have these, pink and yellow and blue colors on it. We can get rid of all those and make it our own color if we want. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I will. So all of these materials here, they probably have very specific, maybe photographic textures applied to them, but because we haven't got that set up yet, and we might not have the reference files, we're going to look at this later. Sometimes instead of a color, you can use a photograph. So we could wrap a photograph of bricks on the building, and we could very quickly have our building looking like it's made of bricks. But I'm just going to use a flat color for now. So I'm going to press the minus button here and just get rid of all these textures, and I'll just add a new one. Okay, let's make the base color, I don't know, yellow, something like that. And if I go Z, material preview, we'll see that yellow building. That looks terrible. That's a little annoying to look at. I think if I render that, F12, it's a little bit annoying to look at. So instead of having the yellow be so saturated, I'm going to desaturate it a bit. I'll just have it a sort of cream color there, and I can make it darker too. I can drag this slider down. And really we're just altering the color values here. And we'll look more closely at color later on in the course as well. Okay, maybe I'll turn this to rendered preview mode as well. Okay, so we've got a building. Cool, cool. The thing about this building at the moment is it looks very flat. We're not really seeing any shadows. And one thing about 3D and painting in general is it's really lighting that makes things look solid and look interesting. So let's do a very quick relighting of the scene. Now there's two sources of light in this scene. To see them, I'm going to press Z and just go to rendered mode. We can see that we've got this light here that if I click on the light and grab it and move it around. I'll set this to rendered mode as well. I can click it here, or I can just go rendered like that. Now here I can move the light around, but I'm pretty sure if I delete this light, okay, we've still got some light. It's not completely black. And that's because in the world properties, as in the sort of this fictional world that this building is in right now, the background is giving off a little bit of light. So if you click on the world tab here, and there's a strength tab, if we move this up and down, we'll see that there is some light by default here. By default it's set to 1. If I set this to 0, okay, now there's definitely no light on our building. Okay, so let's add a light. Maybe let's add 2 lights. Shift A to add something. Light. We're going to add a sun. What a sun does is kind of what the sun does in the real world. It shines light in one specific direction. It doesn't get weaker the further you are away from it. Whereas maybe a little light bulb like we had before, in some areas of the building would be stronger, some would be weaker. So I'll just GZ lift that up a little bit. So with the sun, it actually doesn't really matter where it is in the scene. It matters what direction it's facing. I just moved it up so we can see it. Now I'm going to rotate that sun, R and X, on the X-axis, and give it kind of a nice kind of afternoon sun angle, something like that. So now if we look here, we can see that we've got a slightly more dramatic type of lighting. Maybe we give this light some color too. So if I click on the light, and then I go to the light tab here, color, let's make the light, let's make it something nuts. Let's make it pink. Okay, so now I've got a pink light shining on a yellow building. Looks a bit strange. Let's add another light with a different color. So either I can Shift A and add another light, or I can duplicate this one, as in make a copy. So if I say Shift D and then left click my mouse and G for grab, there's a second light. I don't know if you can see it, but now there's 2 lights in our scene. And I'm going to set the rotation of this back to 0. And this light is going to rotate on the X-axis the other way. That's not so interesting. I'll rotate it on the Y-axis the other way. There we go. So now it's lighting the other side of the building. Okay, I'm going to make this second light weaker than the first one. So in the light setting here, I'm going to grab the strength of the light, put it to 0.5, and I'll change its color to green or something. Okay, so now we can really see that we've got 2 differently colored lights shining on the building. Okay, so there's the building there. Let's grab something else from online. Let's make things interesting. What goes well with the building? Who knows? Okay, so back to Turbosquid. Back home. Maybe an animal. Animal. Keeps wanting me to save my password. Okay, so all the very, very beautiful 3D models are quite expensive. Let's just set things back to free because we're just playing around, so we definitely shouldn't be wasting our money on 3D models. Sometimes I buy models, you know, when I'm doing more specific work. Sometimes you can make a decision when to use someone else's model to save yourself a bit of time. But when we're learning, you know, it's great to either use free ones to play around, and also you've got to learn how to make things yourself. Okay, so we've got OBJ set to free. Oof, what to use? Pigs? What about that deer? That looks pretty cool. I'll add that to my cart. Add the deer. All right. There's dinosaurs and all sorts of stuff. Okay, so the deer is there on my cart now. It's at page 1 instead of page 4 this time, but whatever. Okay, so I'll open up this drop down and let's go for the OBJ. It's also in another zipped file, an RAR file. Okay, now I'm going to save it. And I'll just do the same thing again. Go back to my downloads, find that deer, and Let's extract the files. If you're on a Mac, it's a little bit different. If you have problems with this, we can troubleshoot it in class. And again, let's, maybe it remembers where we went last time. No, it doesn't. Okay, let's go back to my hard drive, my Blender folder, 3D models. That'll do. Okay, extract that file. Okay, so now let's have a look. That should be where we want it. 3D model files. Okay, the deer is there now. We've got the apartment building and the deer, and it's got the OBJ file there. Fantastic. So let's do that same process again. File, import, OBJ, and in the deer folder, there it is. That's probably going to come in huge again. Okay, there's that deer up in the sky. All right. So we can make the deer whatever size we like, but certainly something that's a bit more appropriate for the camera. All right. Okay, so now, you know, just make whatever you want. Think of this as just a nice way to make some interesting content for some of your video work with Daniel. And definitely don't copy what I'm doing. Make something interesting. Add some animations. Okay, let's add some animations just to give you an idea. We could scale the deer. What if the scale of the deer at frame 1, and maybe let's make our animation a little bit longer. So down here in the timeline, I'm going to change the end frame to 120. That gives us a few more seconds to play with. And now the reason we're working with very short animations is you'll notice that long animations do take longer to render. And as soon as we start adding more interesting lighting or more interesting geometry, that render time will become more of an issue. So we're keeping things short for now. Okay, so let's scale it on the y-axis. That kind of could be interesting. So maybe I will, maybe I'll have an animation where the deer gets super long. Maybe I want the deer to be facing a slightly different way. If I rotate that deer like that, so it's kind of facing the camera. So where's our camera? Our camera's here. I'm going to set this back to material preview mode so I can see my workspace a bit more cleanly. Okay, I'll click on that deer, insert a keyframe for the scale, insert here, and maybe on the last frame, let's scale it on the y-axis. Let's have it get longer, but let's keep it in the frame. It's maybe this long. And then I'm just going to press I to insert a keyframe. We don't always have to right click. There's a keyboard shortcut. And often the keyboard shortcuts are actually in the menu. So when I put in that keyframe there, I don't know if you can see next to my mouse there, it says the letter I. So I will also insert a keyframe. Okay, so now if I press play, we have this sort of thing going on. The stretching deer. What else can we do? I'll just do some kind of quick random stuff. What if I add in another one of those monkeys? Shift A, mesh, add in a monkey. Where's that monkey gone? Okay, I'll press G to grab it. There it is. I'm going to look from the top down. I'm going to scale that monkey, S, make it a bit smaller. Let's give it a color. Give it a new material. Change the base color. Let's make it kind of dark. Like a sort of a dark red or something. Let's give it some rotation. So I'll keyframe the Z axis so it's spinning again. So on frame 1, rotation, insert keyframe. The last frame, let's, instead of 360, let's go 720. Insert keyframe. So now spinning monkey head. Let's make the monkey move around. What if on the first keyframe the monkey's here? What if we go to keyframe 20 and G for grab, and to move it here We can see we don't have a keyframe yet, so I'll just hover over the location now and press I. And now if I scroll on the timeline, we should... okay, our monkey hasn't moved. There's a good reason for that. I didn't put a movement keyframe at the beginning. So it only has one keyframe, so it's staying in the same place. So if I go back to frame 1, I need to put it, where was it, back here or something? And also press I, give it a keyframe. So now if we do this, okay, the monkey's moving around. And I'm just going to grab it, click, I, move the timeline a bit more, G for grab, left click to place it, I to place a keyframe, and I'll go over to frame 100, G for grab, left click to place it, and I. Okay, so what's happening now? We've got some animation where the monkey is, well, I'm flying out of frame actually, that's no good. I don't want to have the monkey disappear. Look at this keyframe here, that was a bad decision. Okay, so with this keyframe, I'll make sure we can see the monkey. I'll put it there, press I. Any other bad keyframes like that? Yeah, that one's not so good. Here, we can see it, but let's bring it in a little bit closer. I to replace that keyframe. Okay, cool. So now we have the monkey orbiting the deer. And also we've still got that transparent background. Now you can add all sorts of things. You know, you could also make another building. If we take that building, press Shift D, and before we left click, we can just kind of place it anywhere. And now it's kind of placed it a bit randomly. So maybe I want to have it lower down like the other building. Maybe I'll make a city. Maybe I'll look from the Z axis and I'll Shift D and I'll place another building here and another building here. And okay, so we've got the monkey flying around the buildings. So, same thing again. If we wanted to render out this animation, you know what, I'm going to get rid of those buildings. I'll tell you why. Something about this, because it's got a nice central composition, it might work really well for compositing with other videos. Whereas if I have too much stuff everywhere, if I'm putting this on top of another video, it seems a bit crowded. So okay, I got rid of some of those other buildings. But of course you could make the buildings smaller, whatever you like. But let's just get ready to render. So from last time, I've forgotten something important. Save my file. Now, instead of saving on the same file as last time and removing our lovely cube, I'm going to save it as and make a new file. So when we save as, by default, it will tell us, okay, this is the last one you're working on. I can either give it a completely new name, or I can use this plus button. And what the plus button does is it looks for a number in your file name, and it raises that number. So usually that's great when you're doing multiple versions and I say like version 1, that can be really helpful. But here actually I'm going to give it a different name. I'm going to say class 1, it's not the rotating cube, it's online objects.blend. Okay, so now we should have a copy of the new thing we've been making and the first thing we made. Okay, the other thing before we render that we want to change is we want to change the location. So instead of this folder where our other frames are, let's make a new folder and call it class 1 animation 2 frames. Yeah, give it a name that makes sense to you. That makes sense to me because it's class 1 and our second animation, but you might want to call it deer in building, or a description of what you're working on, whatever you like. Okay, so let's have another look at our animation just quickly. The monkey is rotating around, the deer is expanding through the building. Okay, we haven't really done much to the materials. We haven't put anything on the deer. The deer is just at its default sort of grey color. But that's enough for now, at least for me anyway. I want you to just learn how to get the models from online, import them, animate them, but I want you to make something far more interesting than what I'm making here. This is just kind of playing around, you know? Okay, so now we can go render, render animation. And okay, there we go. So you might notice that this is rendering a tiny bit slower than last time. It's each frame is taking a little bit longer, and we enlarged the number of frames from 60 in the previous version to 120 in this version. So it'll probably take a few minutes to render. Now, a few minutes is still pretty good. And later on, once we move past these introduction animation exercises, we are going to look at more complex lighting. And in the introduction lecture, you saw that I was making these very kind of photorealistic fake images. And in that case, the frames will take much longer than this sort of half second to render. But for now, if we keep things simple, we can make nice quick animations. And so what I'd like you all to do now is to go back to Blender yourself and go online, download some 3D models and just have a play around. Now, I'll give you a few hints. What you might find with some of the 3D models is maybe they've got a really big file type. Maybe the file for the 3D model, let's have a look at what ours are whilst we're rendering. Okay, the deer here is nice and small, 273 kilobytes. What was the apartment building? Okay, 1 megabyte. So that's nice and small for a 3D file. The reason that it's small is that they don't have a lot of detail. You can see that the deer is quite smooth. If we go back, I can minimize this. If we go back into Blender and look at it, the deer is quite sort of simple in a way. I'm going to press tab here, and tab shows us the geometry of the deer. We're going to look at geometry in more detail in our next exercise, but the geometry of the deer is quite simple. It doesn't have fur, or it doesn't have really complex shapes. So that's why the 3D file is quite small. Now, if you're on Turbosquid and the 3D file is 50 megabytes, that's very big for a 3D file. And what you might find is that your scene might slow down a lot. Now, if you need something with a lot of detail, sometimes you have to accept the fact that it's going to slow things down. But if you don't need a lot of detail, then maybe try to avoid downloading really big 3D files. And just as a reminder, the 3D files we're going to be downloading from Turbosquid are just OBJ files and FBX files. And I'll put the notes to that in the description of this video as well. Okay, so that sums it up for this second version, this second Blender tutorial for exercise 1. And I look forward to seeing your progress in our class discussions. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.